Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's impossible to say no to Surinder, Ambassador Surinder Kumar. He's so persistent, and somehow he sees to it that you are in a company which is very formidable. We have practitioners of foreign policy and diplomacy, Shashi Tharoor, Lalit Mansingh, who's consummate diplomat, Gurcharan, who will, I'm sure he will combine globalization, economic factors into foreign policy and all that. Professor Sidhu, he's an old friend and a colleague in the Express, which provides the largest old boys association. You know, this is journalism is a high turnover profession, and Express takes the lead in that. So I'm in a formidable company who know what foreign policy is or ought to be in a changing situation, what factors go into it, and what skills are needed and reflexes are needed to shape it for a particular contingency. I will not take long time because I'm afraid of flower power more than the real bullets. They're quite forbidding. But I'll just make a few remarks to kick off the discussion, and I can come later on at the end of it or somewhere in between, a remark here and there. This discussion is being organized soon after the elections. Apparently, he must have thought it before, Surinder Kumar. And there are question marks. There is a considerable change in the political situation in the country after 10 years of UPA rule. The questions are, is foreign policy going to make major changes in view of all what has been said in rhetorical speeches, campaign speeches? Much has been said about the neighbors. The manifesto of the BJP does not give any indication of change, frankly speaking. There's no indication of change, excepting in one area where they said that nuclear doctrine should be reviewed. And that has also led to questions, and then later on statement by the party president that they don't want to, they are not going to scrap no first use. But otherwise, by and large, is too bland on relations to neighbors, relation to China, relations to others. It's totally quiet. I have a feeling there will not be major change in the basics of foreign policy. I don't know what my friends on the panel are going to say, and they are free to shape their arguments without considering whatever I say as they like. Freedom of thought and expression is fundamental, even in this room. I don't think they can make major changes in the foreign policy. It is sound footings. And whatever changes were necessary have been made quietly by Indian foreign policy makers after the collapse of the Soviet Union. They have reacted pretty fast. Even earlier, enlightened self-interest. I'm not going into the slogans of non-alignment, mantras of non-alignment, etc. Not at all. We are too big countries to be confined to a particular mantra all the time, and non-aligned is very, very flexible kind of a concept which has and can be shaped for any situation. Now the phrase being used is independent foreign policy, which gives you again flexibility. So Indian foreign policy has reacted to different situations pretty well in time and adjusted to the situation. The basic factors in the foreign policy will be changed in case there is a geopolitical situation, not by change of government here. I don't see Narendra Modi government, although this is not suffering from compulsions of coalition politics, as they say. But But nevertheless, the country is coalitional in setup, whether you're in the government or in the opposition. Those factors will matter even now than earlier. Emphasis can shift here and there according to the prevailing situation. The move made by the new government soon after, before the swearing in actually, to invite South Asian leaders was, I would say, a remarkable move, unexpected, out of the blue. I didn't expect it. Others may have invited. It looked dramatic, actually. It was meant, obviously, not to achieve any results, improve relations with Pakistan or Sri Lanka or Bangladesh immediately, but certainly sent a signal to not only to South Asian neighbors, but to the rest of the world that we intend to be practical, I suppose. That's the signal. So I have a feeling Surinder Kumar anticipated, and that's why he's given the title of Pragmatic and Practical. The robust part will come later on, perhaps, that remains to be seen. But pragmatic, practical indications are there. They can't afford to be otherwise. No prime minister can take, or no government, new government can take liberties with foreign policy. There has been a sort of silent or otherwise, with a reservation or otherwise, a national consensus prevailing on foreign policy, and I suppose that will continue. The moment you break that consensus, that we are in deep trouble. And that consensus was born out of freedom struggle, of Nehruvian leadership, the needs of post-independence history, India, and later on, what happened. And that consensus gets manifested whenever there's a crisis, as we have seen over the period. I don't have to go over it. Now, that consensus cannot be broken by the new government because there are no major changes in the geopolitical situation around or in the world. It is axiomatic that we have to have good relations with the neighbors. And if a hardline regime can promise a friendly hand to the neighbors, it sends a good signal elsewhere also in the world. That helps you to gain international, I would say, a better image for the new government. I would say it's not only the neighbors are being aimed at that kind of exercise, but the rest of the world was also being sent the message across that we will be practical and pragmatic. Geopolitics situation prevailing now is certainly going to matter quite a lot. The rise of China, you cannot neglect. You cannot neglect relationship with America. It may not be any longer the superpower of the country, world. No, it is not. But it still remains a major power. Europe doesn't know how to deal with itself or with Russia or with their friends across the Atlantic. They're in a bit of going through a dilemma which Europe has not, it will take some time for them to sort it out. You have to deal a country with India's size, ambitions, economy, the needs, and the geopolitical placement. Have to have foreign policy which is aimed at essentially these factors. What is our aim on which there is a national consensus? And that is also to be kept in mind, which neither Congress ignored or UPA government ignored, nor BJP government will ignore. That India wants to emerge as a major economic, political, nuclear power of 21st century. There is a national consensus on that, spoken or otherwise. Once that is the aim, how do you try to achieve that aim? Globalization, I'm sure you're going to hear more from Gurcharan later on. Globalized economy, and if India is to emerge as a major economic power, it is bound to have friendly relations with most of the major powers, major economic entities in the world. You cannot have otherwise. The trade relations are going to impact the foreign policy. There are other questions, like terrorism. It's our problem. It's terrorists coming from other countries, so-called non-state actors. It's a problem for other countries also. After 9/11, the world has realized that Indian concern about terrorism were very genuine. There's a greater understanding. Including Chinese are now worried about it. So you cannot remain alone in major international questions, whether it is trade or terrorism. There are so many one can see that. So we have to have greater engagement with the world, but not alliances. I don't think Indian polity is based with an alliance with somebody or the other. It has to be flexible. Indian policymakers, I suppose, will have the skill to play with many balls in the air. The other countries are playing, why not we? That flexibility, I'm sure, and the skill, I'm sure this government also will have. So you have to have one policy with Americans, with Europe, you have to good relations with China, and there are going to be countervailing influences which need to be encouraged wherever. Japan and East look policy which has been given. Now you have to balance all the relationships, and Indians are not bad at balancing the relationships. West Asia, you cannot neglect it. Our strategic borders are no longer,
not for chair.
you know.
It should be especially for the chair.
Because no one can take it selfie with that.
Our strategic borders are not, frankly speaking, our foreign policy doesn't begin and end at Wagah. Our strategic borders are from Malacca to Suez. You have to keep it in mind, and if you don't take strategic compulsions into account, along with economic compulsions, along with our national consensus aims, then it will be flawed foreign policy, and I don't think anybody is going to neglect it. So you need freedom of the seas, Indian Ocean interests. So you need a policy in which doesn't harm others and promotes our self-interest, and we call it enlightened self-interest. So the policy will be guided by enlightened self-interest, valid for the 21st century, and our ambitions for the 21st century. There, I'm somehow positive, irrespective of whichever the government is in power, whether it is the BJP government or the UPA or a coalition government or otherwise, we won't be neglecting it. Thank you very much. I'm afraid of the red rose more than the yellow one. That is it.